So this has always been exceedingly interesting to me because this comes up a lot when talking about Morgan's place in the narrative and whether she gets with Eris or not. Which Eris does seem like the most likely candidate for Morgan's endgame ship, but it just doesn't make any sense to me because she's gay. Like, yes, she's bi, like she does sleep with men, but when she sleeps with men, she does it in like a transactional way. She's getting something out of it other than like sex and attraction and romance and love and things like that. This isn't to say that you can't be bisexual and then have a preference for whatever gender that you prefer to be with. Like, that happens all the time. But this is kind of where we get into questions of how much does the mother or the cauldron or the deities of Prithian actually care about the people that are worshiping them or deifying them or whatever? Because if you're right and Morgan's preference has no bearing on her mating bond or has no bearing on what the mother or the cauldron or whatever fuck ass deity is making all these mating bonds happen, if they don't care what Morrigan wants, what are all the mating bonds for? And then that puts every mating bond into question because the love that was built between these mated couples, whether it be Phazand or Callius and Vivienne or anybody else, the mother chose them for like compatibility, love-based reasons. But now we also have to think about the possibility that maybe the mother just doesn't give a shit. Those are the kind of thematics and the kind of questions that I think would really, really flesh out an Elreal story. But that's not the conversation we're having today. I'm not having a shipboard conversation right now. Elreal forever, by the way. I don't know. I just feel like this story is bringing in things like religion and, you know, the benevolence or the love that a deity has for the people that it worships. But then it's not really like exploring those things in any meaningful detail, which means that it'll probably be explored later, or these are just questions that are going to come up and undercut the world building, and then we're not going to have a reason why. Like, it's just, it's so frustrating. But, you know, back to Morgan. Maybe it's just the way that my personal religious beliefs have been constructed and deconstructed throughout my life. I just can't get behind the idea of a deity that doesn't at least know you well enough to know what your preference is when it comes to the people that you want to be with. Even if it's going to just turn that shit on its head and you're going to end up with someone that is very different than what you would have pictured for yourself, they would need to know what your preference was, that deity making those choices for you. Because this is a world that has mating bonds, and because the world has mating bonds, the person putting together all those mating bonds, or the entity putting together all those mating bonds, would have to know these people. Other than that, then like it's random. And then if it's random, who's to stop anyone from pushing back on it? I'd argue that making the mating bonds random and the preferences of a person not really making a difference as to which mating bonds get solidified and how people are chosen for each other, that throws everything about every couple into question. And all of these couples, I think, would then be breakable when you start to really push back against the mother or the cauldron or whoever's making up all these bonds or whatever. Because if the entity making up these bonds doesn't care, then why should the people care, you know? I say again, why should the people... We're not having a shipboard conversation right now. We're not. I promise we're not. Either way, I understand what you're saying in that, like, mating bonds, like, don't care what we want. But the deity probably making them probably does care what they want, because the mother, the cauldron, can be reasoned with, as we learned in Akasif. So, like, because Nesta was able to save Feyre's life and all of that. Like, she was able to make a deal with the mother, meaning that the mother or the cauldron or whatever, those things do care, which means that they must make a difference to the mating bond, you know? I haven't finished Stranger Things yet, but when I was talking about that, about Nesta, like, you know, making a deal with the mother and the mother actually caring, the first thing I thought of was, if I only could make a deal with God, and I get him to swap our places. Kate Bush, man, excellent shit.